Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Whether you're catching up on early 20th century military history, or, you just have a really deep curiosity about the pivotal events that shaped our modern world, you are in the right place.
You absolutely are.
Today, we are looking at a monumental shift in global history. We're drawing from a really comprehensive Wikipedia article detailing the Second Battle of the Marne.
Right, specifically focusing on that really intense window from July 15th through the 18th, 1918.
Exactly. And our mission for this deep dive is to explore how a battle that was originally intended to be a mere diversion.
Basically a massive bloody fake out.
Yeah, a total fake out. How that ended up turning into the absolute last major German offensive on the Western Front.
Yeah.
I mean, it is the clash that ultimately kicks off the final 100 days of World War I.
It really is the turning point.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we aren't just looking at dates on a calendar today.
No, definitely not.
We are exploring the wild tactical innovations, the desperate espionage, and the very real human stories hiding inside this source material.
It's a phenomenal topic to explore, and to really understand the sheer scale of what happens on the Marne River, we have to establish the strategic backdrop first.
Right. Set the stage.
Yeah, we have to look at the German chief quartermaster general, Erich Ludendorff. And the fascinating thing about the Second Battle of the Marne is that Ludendorff did not actually want to fight it.
Which sounds crazy given how massive it was.
I know. But his primary goal, his grand strategy following the failure of the earlier German spring offensive, was to launch a devastating attack much further north, up through Flanders and Belgium.
Okay, so way off to the north.
Right. He believed that an offensive up there would finally crush the British Expeditionary Force, give Germany a decisive victory to just end the war.
But the Marne is much further south. It's closer to Paris.
Exactly. The Marne was, in his mind at least, supposed to be a massive decoy. The entire point was to launch a diversionary attack along the river to draw Allied troops away from Belgium.
Leaving the British completely exposed up in Flanders.
You got it.
So it's essentially a geopolitical sleight of hand. You make a massive noise over here, force the Allies to deal with this immediate threat to Paris, while you're getting ready to throw the real knockout punch up north.
That was the plan, yeah.
But that sleight of hand gets completely turned around on them. While the overarching strategy is fascinating, the tactical execution on the ground is where the story really begins.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's look at the clash east of the city of Reims. The source notes that 23 German divisions.
That's from the 1st and 3rd Armies.
Right. They assaulted the French 4th Army, which actually had the U.S. 42nd Division attached to it. Now, the French defense in this sector was highly unorthodox for the time.
Very.
They utilized a concept called defense in depth.
The brilliance of this French strategy under the command of Henri Gouraud, it just cannot be overstated. Traditionally, military doctrine often dictated putting all of your strength right up front.
Crowding the front line.
Right. Crowding the front to stop an enemy advance dead in its tracks. But Gouraud did the exact opposite. He left his front line very lightly manned.
Which seems so counterintuitive.
It does. But instead, the French set up their main line of resistance 4 to 5 kilometers back from the front. And crucially, they dug this continuous trench line on a reverse slope.
A reverse slope, meaning they positioned their main forces on the backside of a hill.
Exactly, facing away from the enemy's approach. So because they were on that reverse slope, the German artillery observers who were scouting on the ground, they couldn't visually target the main French resistance.
They couldn't see what they were shooting at.
Nope. Between that mostly empty front line and the hidden main line, the French just scattered a few heavily fortified strong points.
But wait, if the front line was virtually empty, wouldn't the German scouts or the advancing infantry notice that something was incredibly wrong before they launched their main attack?
You would think so.
I mean, a quiet trench seems like a massive red flag.
They absolutely would have noticed, which is why the French engaged in a brilliant bit of theatrical deception.
A fake out of their own.
Right. They kept the gun line behind that empty front firing constantly. They maintained a normal rate of artillery fire so the Germans wouldn't detect the weakness from a sudden drop in noise.
That is so smart, because the German offensive tactics heavily relied on the element of surprise, right?
Very much so. They wanted to catch the French off guard with a sudden, overwhelming bombardment.
But the Germans didn't realize they had completely lost the element of surprise. The source mentions French aerial observation had already picked up massive troop movements.
If they could see them massing.
And then the French pull off this incredible intelligence coup, French forces conduct a daring trench raid and manage to capture 27 German prisoners.
And those prisoners broke under interrogation.
They spilled the exact start time of the impending German attack, so the French knew precisely when the hammer was going to fall.
And what's fascinating here is the psychological impact of what happens next, specifically regarding the artillery duel.
Walk us through that.
So the German forces were scheduled to begin their massive preliminary bombardment at 12:10. But because the French had that perfectly timed intelligence from the trench raid, the French artillery opened fire on the crowded German assault trenches at 11:30.
40 minutes before the Germans were even supposed to start.
Yes. Imagine the sheer psychological shock to the German attackers.
I can't even.
They are waiting in their trenches, heavily packed in, preparing to launch this huge surprise attack, only to be suddenly pounded by a massive French artillery barrage.
It's insane.
Furthermore, when the Germans finally did open fire at 12:10 s, they engaged in what is called counter-battery fire.
Meaning they were trying to hit the French artillery gun to neutralize them?
Exactly, but because the French had set up that defense in depth, the German counter-battery fire was mostly striking vacated gun pits.
They were shooting at nothing.
Their artillery was effectively chewing up empty dirt. The choreography of the German battle plan was instantly ruined.
So when the German infantry finally advanced,
They moved through that first empty French line pretty easily, but their rolling artillery barrage...
that's the wall of explosions meant to shield their advance.
Right, that barrage kept moving forward at a set pace. It completely outpaced the infantry because the foot soldiers were getting tangled up by those scattered, hidden strong points the French had left behind.
It is like planning an elaborate ambush, waiting in the bushes, and suddenly the person you were trying to ambush taps you on the shoulder and attacks you first.
It was devastating. By the time the German infantry finally reached the main French line on that reverse slope, they were exhausted, they were bleeding, and utterly disorganized.
The attack just fell apart.
It really did. They actually had to be ordered to rest, regroup, and wait for their own field guns to be dragged forward into range. They didn't attack that main line until 8:30 the following morning, a full hour later than they originally planned, and when they did, they were stopped cold by the bulk of the French artillery.
So the French Fourth Army's defense in depth worked perfectly.
So perfectly that they were actually able to start sending reinforcements to their neighbors across the river.
Who were facing a much direr situation.
Oh, that nightmare scenario.
Let's shift over there. While the French defense in depth was holding the line brilliantly in the east, the situation across the river to the west of Reims was brutal.
Completely different story.
Here, 17 divisions of the German 7th Army, aided by the 9th Army, attacked the French 6th Army. And the source material paints a truly hellish picture of the conditions on the south bank of the Marne River.
The defenders there had to endure an intense 3-hour preliminary bombardment. And this wasn't just high explosives.
Wow.
The Germans utilized a massive amount of gas shells, choking the riverbanks in toxic clouds.
Just horrific.
And under the cover of that gas and artillery, German stormtroopers began their assault. Now, when we say stormtroopers in the context of World War I, we are talking about specialized infantry utilizing infiltration tactics.
Not the guys in white armor from the movies.
Right, definitely not. Instead of advancing in a long, slow line, these highly trained, heavily armed units would rush forward in small groups.
Bypassing heavily defended strongpoints.
Exactly, to strike deep into the enemy's rear communication and supply lines. And to cross the Marne, they were using every sort of transport imaginable. Most notably, these 30-man canvas boats and rafts.
30 men huddled in a canvas boat paddling across a river choked with poison gas while actively being shot at by artillery and machine guns.
It's terrifying.
The sheer terror of that crossing is almost unimaginable for you or me sitting here today.
Oh, absolutely. And the resistance to this crossing was fierce. The French launched a massive aerial intervention to try and stop the swarm of boats.
They sent up planes.
225 bombers, dropping 44 tons of bombs directly onto the river.
Wow.
And hitting the makeshift skeleton bridges the Germans were frantically trying to construct under fire.
And yet, despite the bombs raining from the sky, the German engineers managed to erect bridges at 12 different points.
It's a testament to their engineering, for sure.
Amidst all this mechanized slaughter, we get some incredible stories of human endurance. Our source highlights Colonel Ulysses G. McAlexander and the 38th Infantry Regiment of the American 3rd Infantry Division.
Their stand is one of the most remarkable of the battle.
Tell us about it.
Despite the gas, the relentless artillery, and the swarms of elite German stormtroopers crossing the river, the 38th Infantry refused to yield. They were surrounded on 3 sides at one point.
Two facts.
Yeah, but they held their ground. Some units even launched counterattacks straight into the teeth of the German advance.
That is incredible.
Their absolute refusal to break during this crossing earned the regiment a legendary nickname that persists to this day, the Rock of the Marne.
The Rock of the Marne. That's powerful. But despite the incredible bravery of units like that, and despite the bombers destroying several of those bridges, the sheer numbers of the German assault eventually pushed through the lines.
They did. By the evening of that first day, the Germans had captured a substantial bridgehead on either side of a commune called Dormans, which was a critical crossing point on the river.
And how big was this bridgehead?
It was 4 miles deep and 9 miles wide.
Okay, so that is a significant penetration into the Allied lines.
Definitely.
And Ludendorff certainly viewed it as a massive triumph. Our source notes that Ludendorff prematurely celebrated this crossing. He called the advance the very pinnacle of military victory.
Which is quite a statement, and this raises an important question.
Which is?
How quickly can the so-called pinnacle of military victory collapse when the enemy already knows your grand strategy? And when your forces are stretched incredibly thin across a river, having exhausted themselves on what was supposed to be a decoy attack.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because that pinnacle collapses incredibly fast.
Almost overnight.
The German advance stalls out entirely by July 17th. They hit a brick wall consisting of reinforcements from the British XC Corps and 85,000 fresh American troops.
Fresh being the key word there.
Right. But the Allies didn't just halt the German war machine. They had a devastating counterpunch prepared.
They really did.
And the way they ensured this counterpunch landed involves one of the most cinematic espionage ruses of the entire war.
It sounds like something out of a spy novel. The Allied preparation for their counteroffensive was meticulous. Because of their intelligence gathering, they had a nearly complete picture of the German intentions.
They knew exactly where they were.
Right. But to guarantee their massive counterattack succeeded, they needed the Germans to commit their defenses to the wrong sector.
They needed to create a phantom threat.
Exactly. According to a widely circulated account that our source notes is historically compelling, 2 officers devised a macabre deception. Captain Hunter Grant, an engineer, and Captain Page, an engagement coordinator. They procured a briefcase and filled it with completely fabricating plans detailing a massive, fictitious American counterattack.
A completely fake attack.
Yeah.
And then they took those fake plans and handcuffed the briefcase to the wrist of a man who had recently died of pneumonia.
Yes. They took this deceased man, dressed him as an Allied courier, and staged a vehicle crash.
Unbelievable.
They placed the body in a car and meticulously arranged the scene to look as though the vehicle had run off the road right near a German-controlled bridge.
That is incredibly risky. I mean, if the Germans suspected it was a plant, the entire Allied counteroffensive could be compromised.
The stakes couldn't be higher. But a German patrol found the crashed car. They found the dead messenger, pried open the briefcase, and believed they had just stumbled into the intelligence score of the century.
They bought it.
Hook, line, and sinker. The German command completely fell for the fake plans. They rapidly adjusted their entire defensive line to thwart this imaginary American attack detailed in the briefcase.
By shifting their forces to block an attack that didn't exist, the Germans stretched their lines even further into what military strategists call a salient.
Yes. For those who don't know, a salient is essentially a bulge in the military line where an army has pushed forward into enemy territory.
Leaving them surrounded on 3 sides.
Right. And highly vulnerable on their flanks. By adjusting their defenses based on the fake briefcase plans, the Germans left the actual targets of the Allied counteroffensive completely exposed.
They moved their shields to block a phantom punch.
Leaving their flanks wide open for the real one.
And the real punch, unleashed on July 18th by Allied Supreme Commander Ferdinand Foch, was gargantuan.
It was massive.
We are talking 24 French divisions, which notably included the American 92nd and 93rd Infantry Divisions operating under French command.
Right.
They were joined by 8 large American divisions operating under American command, plus British and Italian troops. And perhaps most terrifying for the German infantry stuck in that salient.
The tanks.
Yes. The assault included 350 Renault FT tanks rolling across the battlefield.
The physical scale of that counteroffensive is just staggering, but the logistical and political nightmare that Ferdinand Foch navigated to make it happen is equally impressive.
Because he's dealing with a coalition.
Exactly. Back in May, Foch had spotted the strategic flaws in the German offensives, noticing how they continually overextended their supply lines. But coordinating a unified response was immensely difficult.
Why was it so hard for him specifically?
Well, as Supreme Commander, Foch did not have direct, unilateral authority to simply issue orders to the different national armies.
So he couldn't just say, do this.
No. He had to work with 4 distinct national commanders: French, American, British, and Italian. He had to persuade and coordinate a coalition force, overcoming massive hurdles.
Like different languages.
Different languages, entirely different military cultures, opposing tactical doctrines, conflicting fighting styles. Keeping that coalition unified during a massive counteroffensive was a monumental feat of leadership.
A huge part of the success of that coalition, according to the sources, was the infusion of those fresh American troops we mentioned earlier.
It changed the dynamic completely.
These were soldiers who hadn't been ground down by 4 years of brutal, stagnant trench warfare. They brought a raw aggression to the line that shocked the exhausted German defenders.
They really did.
There is a deeply moving quote from war correspondent Floyd Gibbons in our source material describing the American troops during this push. He wrote, "I never saw men charged to their death with finer spirit."
That aggressive spirit, combined with the mechanized terror of the tanks and the element of surprise secured by the dead man's briefcase, it shattered the German lines.
It broke them.
This engagement forced a German withdrawal that was never effectively reversed. It was the beginning of the end.
But as we discuss the brilliance of the strategy and the turning of the tide, we have to slow down and honor the grim reality of this victory.
Always. The cost was absolute devastation.
The source gives us specific casualty numbers that are difficult to even comprehend. For example, during a vicious German assault on July 19th, the Italian Corps successfully held their sector and stopped the German advance, but the price was horrifying.
Yeah.
They lost 9,334 officers and men out of a total fighting strength of about 24,000.
Nearly 40% of an entire fighting force wiped out in a single desperate action just to hold a patch of ground.
It's a staggering sacrifice.
Yeah, the desperation during those days of the counteroffensive was palpable everywhere. The fighting was so intense in a critical geographical corridor called the Ardres Valley.
Which was a direct route leading toward Paris.
Right. It was so intense there that French General Henri Mathias Berthelot had to take 2 newly arrived British infantry divisions, the 51st Highland and the 62nd West Riding, and rush them straight from their transport trains into a massive attack down the valley.
Just off the train and into the fire.
Just to keep the pressure on the retreating Germans.
It was a relentless meat grinder. But the pressure ultimately achieved its objective. By July 20th, the German High Command realized their position in the salient was untenable.
They had to get out.
They were forced to order a massive retreat, pulling their battered forces back to the exact positions from which they had started their spring offensive months earlier.
Basically back to square one.
And the Allies relentlessly pursued them. Costly, grinding assaults continued for minimal geographical gains. But by early August, the massive bulge in the line had been reduced.
The salient was gone.
Let's look at the final statistics of this battle because they truly contextualize the horrific scale of the First World War. The Allies took 29,367 German prisoners.
Just massive numbers.
They captured 793 heavy guns and 3,000 machine guns. In total, they inflicted a staggering 168,000 casualties on the German army.
And the cost of that victory for the Allies was equally catastrophic. The Allies suffered roughly 133,000 casualties combined.
300,000 casualties across both sides.
Yeah. We are talking about over 300,000 human beings killed, wounded, or captured in a matter of a few weeks along a single river valley.
It is a profound amount of suffering to secure a shift in the front line.
It really is. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the sheer material loss in guns and manpower was something the German army could no longer replace.
They're capped out.
Completely. But the primary lasting importance of the Second Battle of the Marne was morale. For Ferdinand Foch, orchestrating this massive coalition victory earned him the prestigious baton of a Marshal of France.
A massive honor.
But for the war as a whole, the strategic shift on the Marne decisively ended the long, terrifying string of German victories. It broke their momentum permanently.
Force them onto the defensive.
Exactly. And sparked a relentless series of Allied advances. It is the definitive turning point that would ultimately force an armistice and end the war approximately 100 days later.
So what does this all mean? We started out looking at a battle that was meant to be a simple decoy.
The distraction.
A massive, bloody distraction to pave the way for a decisive strike in Flanders. But through a combination of brilliant, unorthodox strategy like the reverse slope defense, the raw endurance of units fighting off canvas boats and rivers choked with poison gas, and the sheer audacity of staging a dead man with a briefcase full of fake plans, the Allies turned a decoy into the decisive turning point of the First World War.
They flipped the script completely.
It is a powerful reminder that history is rarely a list of inevitable outcomes. It is forged by human stories, fragile moments of luck, and incredible endurance in the face of absolute horror.
It truly is. And as we consider the specific events of this battle, it leaves me with a lingering thought for you to ponder long after you finish listening.
What's that?
Well, the massive tide-turning Allied counterattack we discussed was heavily aided by the successful deception of a dead man in a crashed car. The Germans fell for the fake plans, altered their lines, and exposed themselves to defeat.
Right.
It makes you wonder, how much of recorded history and grand military strategy hinges not on tactical genius, but on bizarre, highly risky parlor tricks that just happen to work?
That's a great point.
What other massive shifts in history might have been decided by a simple, macabre bluff?
That is a deeply unsettling and profound thought to leave off on. We want to thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the Second Battle of the Marne. We hope it sparked some new questions, gave you some fresh perspectives on the events that shaped our world, and as always, we encourage you to stay curious. See you next time.